Paul Atreides stands in the settling silence after Arrakeen's fall, surrounded by a world still adjusting to the sudden shift in power. 12 years will pass before the events recorded in Dune Messiah, yet the seeds of that distant future already stir beneath the surface. The wind crossing Arrakeen still carries the scent of stone scorched by weapons discharge, and in the quiet that follows conquest, the weight of victory settles upon him with a density more suffocating than the desert heat. The Fremen chant Muad'Dib across the dunes, their voices rising like a tide that sweeps through the basins of Arrakeen and rolls outward toward the shattered plains where the final battles were fought. The sound carries more than triumph. It carries the weight of a people who believe they have witnessed the fulfillment of a destiny etched into their legends. Each cry bears the cadence of a vow, a pledge to the man who led them from obscurity into a position of immeasurable influence. Above Arrakeen, the armada of the great houses once hung in the sky, ready to unleash destruction on the desert below. Their warships had descended in layered formations, blotting out the sun as if intending to suffocate the desert beneath the weight of their authority. In that moment, the sky itself became a battleground for legitimacy. Yet Paul confronted them without flinching. By declaring mastery over the spice, the lifeblood of every house, the pulse of all interstellar travel, he dismantled their threat with a single revelation. He reminded them that the spice obeyed his will, that he could destroy it if pressed, and that such destruction would collapse the Imperium's arteries forever. Behind him stood the Fremen legions, unmatched in discipline and devotion, and the promise of a jihad that could sweep across the galaxy with unstoppable ferocity. Faced with this convergence of power, the great houses realized their fleets were little more than ornaments drifting above a world they no longer controlled. Across the wider Imperium, Paul's name circulates through courts and strongholds with a tone far more cautious. The noble houses speak it with a reverence sharpened by unease, for they watched their combined strength falter against a force they barely understood. Shaddam IV, stripped of majesty, withdraws into the fragile dignity Paul permits him. The once emperor accepts exile with a stiffness that betrays the humiliation beneath his formal composure. His fall remains a warning, etched into the minds of every house leader, a demonstration that even the Golden Lion throne can be overturned in a single afternoon. This chronicle begins in that fragile moment when triumph still rings through the streets, yet the shadow of what is to come already grows at the edge of Paul's prescient vision. The empire he has won stretches before him like a corridor whose walls shift faster than he can steady them. And though the people celebrate a savior, he senses foundations trembling beneath every cheer. Stability becomes Paul's first burden, a responsibility that settles over him with the steady pressure of shifting dunes. The Landsraad watches with narrowed eyes as he attempts a delicate reconstruction of political reality, aware that a single misstep could ignite dormant feuds. The great houses observe Paul's first moves with guarded interest, measuring his strength in silence. Behind their composed expressions, they begin laying the early threads of intrigue, searching for any sign of weakness they might use to regain influence. Some houses send envoys who speak in polished diplomacy while quietly mapping the weaknesses of Arrakeen's new power structure. Others renew old alliances in secret, forging pacts meant to counterbalance the influence of the Fremen should the political winds shift again. They recognize the authority now claimed by Muad'Dib, yet they feel the sting of humiliation lingering beneath their formal obedience, a wound that festers into whispered strategy. Paul senses their resentment circulating behind the polite ceremonial bows that mask unspoken accusations, and he detects the beginnings of networks forming across the Imperium, communications routed through obscure channels, shipments disguised under false manifests, and councils convened under pretexts that hide deeper intentions. The great houses must be contained, yet not provoked. The Fremen must be honored, yet not unleashed without restraint. Each choice becomes a negotiation between loyalty and fear, Paul knows that the Fremen expect positions of privilege earned through sacrifice, but he also understands that giving them unrestricted power across the Imperium could fracture every political structure holding the system together. The Imperial bureaucracy must function, even as its loyalty shifts beneath him like sand in a windstorm, revealing pockets of resistance concealed beneath layers of protocol and tradition. Paul turns to Stilgar, whose authority commands the respect of tribes newly unified under a single banner. Stilgar carries the weight of Fremen expectation better than anyone Paul trusts. His presence bridges the gap between siege custom and imperial necessity. Stilgar navigates the tension between Fremen's zeal and the measured demands of governance with calm endurance. His guidance prevents the new administrative order from splintering, especially when warriors accustomed to the freedom of the desert struggle to adapt to the rigid frameworks of imperial offices. Paul notices how often Stilgar diffuses confrontations simply by entering a room, his voice carrying the gravity of a lifetime shaped by survival. Chani becomes Paul's compass, steady and unwavering. She guides his understanding of Fremen expectation and warns him when reverence twists into demands that threaten political stability. Her insights reveal nuances invisible to off-worlders, how a phrase spoken with confidence can be interpreted as an oath, how a gesture of gratitude can be seen as a blessing. In private, their discussions blend strategy and intimacy, each reinforcing the other. There are evenings where they speak with quiet intensity about the fate of tribes, about the slow transformation of Arrakis under imperial influence, about the roles they have been forced to carry. Yet even in those quiet hours, Paul feels watchers, priestly voices rising among the Sayeches, eager to elevate every gesture into scripture and every whisper into doctrine. Dalia, preborn and terrifyingly aware, moves through the corridors like a living omen. Her presence unsettles nobles, who whisper rumors of witchcraft behind veiled hands, and awes the Fremen, who interpret her as a sign that Lisan al-Gaib's prophecy deepens in ways they barely comprehend. Aliyah absorbs the shifting atmosphere with an unsettling calm, her eyes carrying the depth of ancient memory. She senses deception with uncanny precision, and exposes hidden dissent simply by asking a question. To many, she becomes an embodiment of fate, an impossible child forged by spice and memory. Her shadow stretches across the palace halls, reminding every visitor that the Atreides dynasty has entered territory no other house has ever dared to tread. In the weeks following the fall of Arrakeen, Paul enters a phase of governance that demands precision. The initial consolidation is behind him, yet the deeper work of transforming an improvised desert uprising into an operational empire has only begun. What unfolds is a period defined not by dramatic decrees, but by a slow tightening of systems, by 1,000 decisions that determine how the Imperium will function under Atreides' rule. Administrative envoys arrive from across the galaxy, each bearing reports of fractured supply lines, competing jurisdictions and bureaucracies, unsure of how to adapt to an emperor who rose outside traditional frameworks. Paul studies these reports late into the night, tracing patterns of resistance hidden beneath formal compliance. He sees where the old imperial offices try to maintain habits of the Carino era, clinging to outdated structures in hopes that his rule will prove temporary. To counter this, he assigns trusted Fremen as observers, embedding them within the imperial ministries. Their presence is quiet, but unmistakable. These observers do not command, yet their mere proximity forces long-entrenched officials to confront a new reality. The desert now watches their every move. Some comply out of fear, others out of pragmatism, and a few adapt willingly, intrigued by a system that values efficiency over lineage. Meanwhile, newly appointed Atreides administrators travel to distant sectors to evaluate conditions firsthand. They encounter populations uncertain how to interpret the new order. Some welcome change, hoping for relief from the corruption of past regimes. Others distrust the rapid rise of a ruler shaped by prophecy rather than tradition. Reports return describing planets where civic structures function unevenly, caught between old loyalties and new expectations. Paul understands that stabilizing the Imperium requires more than force. It demands adaptation and the quiet reweaving of political fabric stretched thin by generations of rivalry. This transitional period becomes an unglamorous but crucial phase, one where the foundations of his reign must be set before the expanding jihad overwhelms every other priority. The jihad ignites when distant fiefdoms resist Paul's authority, their dissent fueled by fear of change and the belief that the new emperor's reach cannot possibly extend into the farthest corners of the Imperium. Minor houses misjudge the strength of the newly forged imperial forces and organize rebellions born from desperation rather than strategy. They assume Paul's rule is fragile, a temporary disruption in the great political tides that have governed the galaxy for millennia. These miscalculations lead them into conflict they cannot hope to control. The Fremen respond with swiftness shaped by a lifetime of desert survival and religious fervor. Their movements are precise, their tactics relentless. Veterans of Arrakis fight with the confidence of warriors who have endured conditions that would break any off-world soldier. What they carry into battle is more than training. It is the unshakable conviction that their actions serve a purpose written into the fabric of the desert's oldest legends. Their victories are absolute, their discipline unmatched, their belief unshakable. Word spreads quickly, entire battalions fall before them, fortresses collapse in days rather than weeks, and planetary rulers surrender after witnessing only a single maneuver. In the wake of these engagements, off-world observers begin crafting stories that blur the lines between military precision and divine intervention. These early battles become parables whispered among conquered worlds. Each Fremen warrior moves with the calm certainty of someone who believes the universe tilts toward a sacred destination. When they strike, they do so without hesitation, as if guided by a rhythm deeper than command structure. The defeated territories interpret this not as conquest, but as visitation by a legend, Muad'Dib's shadow stretching across the stars. Yet none of this expansion would be possible without the silent cooperation of the Spacing Guild. Their submission does not come from loyalty, but from necessity. Paul's control over the spice places a hand at the throat of every guild operation. For without spice, the navigators cannot guide their ships, and the Imperium collapses into immobility. Terrified by the possibility that Paul might reduce or even end the flow of spice, the Guild agrees to move his forces across the stars. Their highliners become the unwitting arteries of the jihad, carrying Fremen warriors to worlds Paul never sees, enabling battles he does not command directly. Each journey marks another step in a war the Guild fears but cannot resist, their dependence on spice binding them to the very storm they hope one day to escape. The jihad spreads faster than Paul anticipates. It moves through the Imperium with the speed of an epidemic, carried by belief that multiplies on its own. It grows beyond the reach of any council or chain of command, expanding across star systems where Paul never sets foot. Songs about the victories travel ahead of the armies, shaping expectations before a single Fremen warrior arrives. Dreams of liberation and purification take root among populations who have never seen Arrakis, their hopes fueled by stories that drift from world to world like wildfire. Testimonies from returning soldiers, filled with awe and conviction, magnify the myth until the jihad becomes a force acting entirely through Paul's legions, requiring no presence from the Emperor himself, a movement that carries itself forward without pause. Fremen conscripts believe themselves chosen to cleanse the Imperium of corruption. They march with pride, recounting the transformation of their once overlooked people into the center of galactic destiny. Every triumph fuels their devotion, Every defeat hardens their resolve. Where once they fought for tribes, now they believe they fight for the balance of existence itself. Paul senses a force gathering beyond his command, something vast taking shape beneath the surface of victory. His attempts to restrain the warriors fall short, each order diluted by interpretations from priests and generals who view caution as weakness. Fervor answers only to fervor, amplifying itself until no single voice can redirect its path. As the tide expands across the stars, Paul realizes the jihad grows into an organism with its own will, using his name as its pulse. It spreads with a momentum that no longer requires his presence, a living engine powered by blood and prophecy. In that realization lies the first echo of the tragedy that will one day envelop him. The Empire strains beneath the collision of old power structures and the rising theocratic momentum gathering around Muad'Dib. The shift feels seismic, shaking the foundations of institutions that once stood unchallenged. Fanatics champion a future shaped entirely by the desert's uncompromising discipline, believing that every law must echo the stark simplicity of Arrakis. Moderates move with caution, sensing a tide of spiritual fervor that could sweep away the last remnants of balance. Some fear that centuries of accumulated wisdom may erode beneath the weight of a belief system spreading faster than any decree. Former nobles cling to fragments of their former authority, maneuvering in shadows, trading secrets in attempts to remain relevant in a political landscape that no longer favors them. In distant exile, surviving Carinos weave the first strands of conspiracies meant to reclaim a measure of dignity. Their movements are subtle, their influence shifting through hidden channels once used for trade and diplomacy. They watch, patient and calculating, waiting for the Empire's vast machinery to reveal its first true weakness. Every rumor, every minor disturbance becomes a potential foothold. Their resentment smolders quietly, feeding ambitions shaped by memories of the Golden Lion throne. Within the expanding religious structure surrounding Paul, ambition multiplies with alarming speed. Priests reinterpret his words to suit their personal agendas, bending meaning to strengthen their influence. Administrators assemble doctrines without his consent, layering bureaucracy onto faith in ways that restrict rather than clarify. Predictions of Paul's intentions circulate faster than he can challenge them, rippling through the Imperium as if they were sanctioned truths. Each misinterpretation hardens into dogma, spreading through temples, courts, and sitches alike. The prescient paths opening before him reveal storms no human mind can fully comprehend. Futures twist into shapes that leave Paul reeling, confronting outcomes that move with relentless momentum. He begins to feel the pressure of inevitability building around every decision, tightening its hold with each passing day. The Empire advances toward a point where even his extraordinary abilities struggle to keep pace with the accelerating tide of belief and fear. Muad'Dib becomes a symbol shaped by endless interpretation, a figure whose presence gathers layers of meaning faster than even the most devoted chroniclers can record. Every appearance transforms into liturgy, recited and memorized before the moment has even faded. Every silence becomes a command, dissected by priests and officials eager to extract guidance from the quiet spaces between his words. The human behind the myth recedes into the distance, his features blurred by reverence and expectation, visible only to those few who knew Paul before the desert carved destiny into him. Chani watches him with growing worry, sensing how devotion around him thickens into something suffocating. Their private relationship becomes a spectacle observed from the shadows, clergy searching for prophetic meaning, courtiers hoping for political cues, chroniclers eager to interpret every glance. Even moments of joy ripple outward as commentary, reshaped into metaphors of divine favor. Even grief becomes doctrine, parsed by onlookers who claim insight into the Emperor's spirit, while understanding nothing of the man himself. Paul's isolation deepens as these forces close around him. From a distance, Chani watches the subtle changes in his posture and the growing silence that settles around him like a second mantle. She sees the way he lingers at balconies and doorways, lost in futures only he can perceive, and she feels the widening gulf between the man she loves and the emperor the Imperium demands. There are moments when she reaches for him, only to stop herself, sensing that even her presence cannot cut through the weight pressing upon his thoughts. His prescient sight grows sharper and more painful, revealing consequences accelerating beyond any hope of correction. The jihad's path winds outward into chaos, painting futures drenched in fire, fanaticism, and cycles of conquest that tighten no matter where he turns his attention. He perceives potential calamities where he once expected order, watching possibilities fracture into storms that converge faster than he can navigate. No army stands against him, yet he feels outmatched by the very forces that claim to serve him. The reverence of millions becomes a barrier, the machinery of faith turning with such momentum that even the Emperor finds himself carried forward rather than directing its motion. Jessica moves through the palace like a figure carved from old memory, her presence a quiet counterpoint to the noise surrounding Paul's reign. She observes her son with the keen perception of a Bene Gesserit and the wounded affection of a mother who feels history tightening around him. To her, the throne room carries more dangers than the open desert ever did, for she knows how politics devours the unprepared. She fears for Chani as well, sensing how the court's watchful eyes pry into their private life, twisting intimacy into spectacle. Jessica sees how Chani is judged as both concubine and Fremen, and she worries that the pressures of prophecy and lineage will erode the bond between her and Paul. Her distrust of Irulan simmers beneath every exchange. Jessica understands the Bene Gesserit training sharpened within the princess and recognizes the cold practicality behind her courteous facade. Irulan watches Paul with the diligence of a historian and the ambition of someone determined to secure influence in a future she cannot shape. Jessica warns her son that Irulan's loyalty lies with the sisterhood and the Carino legacy, not with the Atreides. She senses Irulan's frustration at being a political link rather than a true partner, and she fears how that frustration might be weaponized by others. Jessica's disdain for the Landsraad is even sharper. She sees in their polite gestures and ceremonious pledges the same opportunism that once undermined Duke Leto. To her, the noble houses are a shifting tide of alliances and betrayals, a force that must be managed but never trusted. She tells Paul that their deference masks calculations, that their apparent compliance only conceals waiting claws. Paul listens, aware that Jessica's warnings are not the calculations of a reverend mother alone, but the instincts of someone who has spent her life surviving institutions shaped by secrets and design. Yet an unspoken tension threads through their exchanges. Jessica sees the widening gulf between the boy she raised and the emperor forged by desert prophecy. Paul feels the weight of her judgment, not condemnation but sorrow for the destiny pressing upon him. Their silences speak of choices neither can undo. Amid these political discussions lies another concern, the future of Arrakis itself. Jessica watches the desert with the eye of someone who understands ecology as deeply as politics. She sees patches of altered terrain where wind patterns shift and moisture gathers in ways unfamiliar to the old sitches. The dream of transforming Arrakis whispers at the edges of every environmental report, invoking the legacy of Liet Kynes. Paul feels the pull of that vision, yet prescience shows him the paradox at its core. Each step toward a greener world reshapes the cycle that sustains the worms and with them the spice. In quiet moments, Paul confides to Jessica the futures where Shai Hulud dwindles, where the sand plains fracture under unfamiliar climates, where the very soul of Arrakis dissolves under the pressure of change. Jessica listens, weighing the ecological promise against the spiritual cost. She recalls how the Fremen dreamed of open water and fertile fields, Yet she feels the unease that radiates from Paul when he speaks of these visions. A transformed Arrakis is both salvation and threat, a world reborn, but stripped of the ancient rhythms that shaped its people. Jessica urges caution, reminding Paul that ecological transformation is not merely a matter of engineering, but of culture and spirit. She knows the Fremen will embrace the promise of life, but she also knows that the loss of the old desert could fracture their identity. Paul hears her, yet he senses that the future moves faster than either of them can steady. These moments between mother and son reveal the depth of the tragedy forming around them. Jessica sees the Empire tightening its grasp on Paul, even as he tries to navigate the narrow path between prophecy, duty, and the shifting sands of Arrakis. Their conversations become the last tether to a life before myth consumed him. Dissent grows beneath the surface with a quiet persistence, threading its way through the channels of the Imperium like a current, waiting for the right moment to swell into something far more dangerous. Rival factions sharpen their schemes in secluded halls and behind coded transmissions, watching Paul with the wary patience of those who believe power shifts in the smallest hesitation. Their movements are subtle but constant, shaped by private councils, whispered promises and alliances that bend with every rumor carried across the starways. Theocratic zeal intensifies among the priesthood to a degree that borders on suffocation, turning worship into obligation and elevating compliance into a sacred duty. Their influence stretches across temples and courts alike, creating a network of expectation that constrains Paul's decisions long before he speaks them aloud. The seeds of conspiracy germinate within the Imperium's fractured heart, settling in the cracks between loyalty and fear. Noble houses dread extinction and see in every triumph of Muad'Dib a reminder of how fragile their legacies have become. Long-standing dynasties that once shaped the course of politics now operate in the margins, hoping to preserve influence through resistance disguised as tradition. Bureaucracies recoil from the overwhelming presence of a ruler elevated beyond mortal rank, unable to reconcile administrative order with a figure whose authority seems to draw from both prophecy and history. Paul begins to recognize in each of these tensions the early outlines of the storm that will one day surround the conspiracy described in Dune Messiah, a storm woven not from a single source but from countless anxieties converging into purpose. He witnesses futures where betrayal blossoms with a force that feels almost preordained, shaped not by hatred, but by the deep, instinctive terror of those who can no longer predict their place in the world he shapes. Their fear grows from the image of a figure whose prescient awareness seems limitless, whose decisions echo across the Imperium before they have even been made. He sees the possibility of plots driven by panic, by a desperate need to reclaim control from an emperor, transformed into a mythic presence whose shadow extends farther than any throne has ever allowed. Paul walks a tragic arc defined by this growing tension. He moves through the days aware of the widening gap between the visionary who sought a new balance and the sovereign carried forward by currents set in motion long before he understood their consequences. Each step reminds him of the violence required to maintain victory, the cost demanded by an empire rebuilt through fire and belief. He carries the knowledge that his ascendancy rests upon the momentum of a jihad he never desired, a tide that now shapes him as much as it shapes the Imperium he rules. The chronicle closes not with triumph, but with recognition. Paul Atreides stands encircled by worship yet imprisoned by expectation. The jihad reshapes the Imperium far beyond his intentions, while each prophecy attributed to him deepens the cage. He remains a visionary, yet the future grows heavier. Every prescient path leads toward sacrifice, conflict, and the slow crumbling of the human self hidden behind Muad'Dib. This period, compressed between Dune and Dune Messiah, forms the essential foundation of Paul's tragedy. Understanding it unmasks the fragility behind the Empire's divine facade, and prepares the ground for the profound unraveling soon to come. A gateway now opens toward Dune Messiah, where Paul confronts the crescendo of the myth built in his name and the consequences that no vision can soften.